Ladies, ladies and gentlemen, the opening session is about to start. Please take your seats and mute your phones.
I would like to welcome you as chair of the 8th International Conference on AIDS, the 3rd World STD Congress, to this meeting. Honored guests all.
The fight against AIDS is not and must never be a fight against other people. It is a fight of human beings against a virus.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Master of Ceremonies for this evening, Omar Sharif Jr.
Well, hello. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to AIDS 2018. Woo! I am honored to be your Masters of Ceremonies tonight. It is a privilege to stand here in Amsterdam this evening, following in the footsteps of our colleagues from 1992. Thank you for being part of a fight that stretches back more than 30 years. The world doesn't thank you enough for the work that you do, so I want to make sure you hear it very clearly right now, right up front. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. Before we get started, though, I also want to acknowledge the thousands of people that are watching and engaging from afar, and I'm going to need your help with that. I want everyone in the room to say, welcome to AIDS 2018 on the count of 3. Could you help me out? Can we do that? Welcome to AIDS 2018. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I love that. That was great. What a way to begin an evening. Hi. My name's Omar Sharif Jr., and I'm best known for being actor Omar Sharif's grandson, which for me means one thing, and that's a lifetime of feeling inadequate. That's okay. Seriously though, growing up a Sharif in Egypt, that's kind of like being born a Kennedy, or from some angles, more of a Kardashian, maybe. The point I'm trying to make is that I grew up very privileged. I got to be an actor from a young age, a spokesperson for top brands, and even an underwear model. I've since rediscovered carbohydrates, so that's no longer in my cards. But in 2012, all of that changed. At the height of the Arab Spring, I became the first Arabic public figure to come out openly as gay and question the government's commitment to basic human rights and equality. Thank you. My announcement immediately went viral, and I was met with widespread criticism, threats of violence, and death threats. And I think a lot of people in this room know exactly how that feels. I left the country, and I have not been home since. In my region of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, talking about LGBTQ issues and certainly talking about HIV are incredibly risky. Just starting a conversation takes courage, And that's why I'm so pleased to be here tonight as an ambassador for the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, along with all of you at the front line of the fight against HIV. It's you guys. The world doesn't thank you enough for all that you do, and I want to make sure that you hear it very clearly from all of us across the Middle East and North Africa and around the world, from all of us who are silenced by fear, by repression, and by stigma. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To start off this evening, I want to welcome two representatives of our lovely host country. Please join me in welcoming Minister Sigrid Kaag, Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperations of the Netherlands, and Dina de Roquette-Bons, who is the co-chair of Transgender Europe and a board member at Proud Union for Dutch Sex Workers, International Committee Sex Workers' Rights Europe, and HIV Vereniging Nederland. Thank you.
I received my HIV diagnosis in 1991 in New York on a hot summer's day at the piers near Christopher Street. I can hardly describe what an effect my HIV diagnosis had on me at the age of 21, knowing there was no future for people living with HIV and AIDS back then. The only perspective was getting sick, deteriorating, and dying painfully with no treatment and no cure. From that moment onwards, I learned about society's stigma, exclusion, discrimination, anger, hate, and fear towards those living with HIV and AIDS. I saw my communities fighting day by day with no hope. We lived without a notion of tomorrow or the future. Now, see me at the age of 48, standing here in front of you. As a proud trans woman of color, a longtime survivor, an HIV and trans sex work activist. It's an enormous honor and an important momentum for me and all the communities I represent to welcome you all here together with our Minister of Foreign Trade and Development, Mrs. Kaag, at the opening of the 22nd International AIDS Conference in Amsterdam. Transgender sex workers are fighting every day to survive poverty, violence, homelessness, joblessness, and bad access to health care. We face exclusion, discrimination, and racism at all levels of society. We are highly affected by power structures that do not include us. We must work way harder to achieve a good quality of life and equal access to health care. How can we stop HIV and AIDS and fight such inequality, which at the end of the day affects us all? How do we end the disproportionate suffering in overrepresented groups in key populations affected by HIV and AIDS? These are questions to which people from my community have valid answers, yet we are not invited to contribute our knowledge and experience when decisions are made on what could and should be done to end the epidemic. To those of you in positions of power, I say, build bridges to those groups that are made invisible by society because of fear, of phobia, and stigma, discrimination, and racism. Trans sex workers, especially Black and those of color, living with HIV are the most stigmatized, discriminated people worldwide and experience the highest rates of murder and suicide. But we people living with HIV are not here as a window dressing. Building bridges means sitting at the table when decisions are being made. It means giving us a voice and inviting us to reflect when making policies on sex work, on human trafficking, and on STI and HIV prevention. Yet, time and time again, the JIPA principles are overlooked or ignored. Let's strengthen collaborative governance, not weaken it. It is quintessential if we want to reach 0 new HIV infections. Lastly, we need the undetectable is untransmittable or you is you message to become standard knowledge worldwide. It needs to sound louder every day as this eases the burden of stigma and self-stigma of people living with HIV. It will save lives. It will reduce suicides and murders on trans sex workers especially. Please give all your wisdom, knowledge, and power in the coming days to contribute to the fight against HIV and AIDS and to change our narratives. Together we can beat the virus, and together we can shape the future for our generations to come. Thank you.
Good evening. Well, I think Dina is, in all positive ways, the toughest act to follow. Credit to you, Dina. What a power woman! And I can only ask Dina to run for office because I think we need many more women in Netherlands in politics. Go! Go, go, go! Truly. Truly. I have a few lines about Dina, but I am so inspired by what she said. It's not just breaking barriers, building bridges. The message about rights, human rights, the call to action, the knowledge, the advice to people like me, the encouragement and hope for all of us, and that voice for our global shared humanity and solidarity. You are the most powerful people in the room. You give hope to all of us, and all we can do is be part of the journey, to build bridges, to break the barrier. And I'm extremely proud, humble, as a Netherlands Minister for Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation, that my country is hosting once again this conference. The last time, as you know, was in 1992, in the Netherlands, in the city of Amsterdam. We're proud, but we're also very committed to champion the causes you stand for, to join your fight. It is a call to action, and we will support it politically, operationally, and in our partnerships. And we're proud to have people like you be present with us. Yeah. And I have to admit already to one default, because I tend to go a little bit off script. So I asked the gentleman who does the cue so nicely not to jump too much, because otherwise I'll get stuck on the first paragraph forever and we'll never reach the end. And that won't be good. So my second commitment, of course, is that as the Netherlands, we commit to sustain and foster inclusive, diverse society, and with that, tangible political and financial support for marginalized communities, and in particular, people living with HIV and living with AIDS. As I said, as Dina said, this is about stigma, this is about the battle against marginalization and inclusion. We have, however, been successful in the Netherlands. We are known ourselves for a robust and inclusive AIDS response, and inclusiveness is the name of the game and the solution. It's come to be known as the Dutch approach, as you know, and Professor Reis and his colleagues are here. We know that progress is made. We've done it in the Netherlands, but we know we may be an example to some. Our progress needs to be shared globally. Countries need to follow. All citizens everywhere need to have access. Access is a matter of a translation of rights. The global situation, and I think I'm not telling you anything new, regarding HIV and AIDS is, however, still of grave concern. Dina has highlighted it, but the numbers are compelling. Whilst there is progress on the one hand, 970,000 people have passed away unnecessarily. They have died of AIDS last year alone. Every death is a death too many. Worldwide, 37 million people are infected or living with HIV or AIDS today. Progress, in the sense of access to service, is the 22 million that have access to therapy and retroviral medicine. It's an achievement. But what about the 15 million others who are excluded, who may not be able to speak, seek treatment, or too afraid to reach out? Treatment is lacking for them to save their lives. In 2018, this is unconscionable. This is not an unsaid, unknown disaster. This is lacking access, lacking in supplies, lacking in support, in whichever shape or form. Currently, as you know, over 30% of HIV/AIDS infections globally actually occur amongst people of the age 15 to 25. Our next generation is at risk. 5 million young people live with HIV today. It is the second largest cause of death amongst our adolescents globally, and the first cause of death with adolescents in Africa. That's why I'm so glad to have participated this afternoon, hosted by Mabel, in a session listening to young people living with HIV, their needs, and above all, their recommendations to us. We need to learn, we need to listen, or rather listen and then learn to young people, empower them, and humbly support them in a way they seek it and they want it. Equally so, and Dina already spoke to this, gay men and men who have sex with men are 19 times more likely to be exposed or to be ending up living with HIV than the general population. This figure is increasing in several parts of the world. Red flag, red light, cause of grave concern. HIV prevalence among sex workers is 12 times greater than amongst the general population. And people who inject drugs account for an estimated 30% of new HIV infections outside of sub-Saharan Africa. And in many parts of the world, migrants, regular or irregular, refugees do not have the same entitlements. They cannot claim their right or exercise their right to health services. Our failure to protect, and I call it failure, to protect major key populations against HIV infection are poignant manifestations of social, cultural, legal, economic, and gender-based inequality, rights and absence of rights. After more than 30 years, despite the successes, we have still not been able to address some of the root causes that keep this epidemic from going and going. And this means our inability to achieve equality and our failure to do more. It's not acceptable, and this is why today we need to not only build on experience, we need to call out, listen to each other continuously, learn, support, but act. The change, the value proposition, and the narrative, as was mentioned, also lies in the implementation of solution. We know what we can do. Better prevention through education, practical assistance, access to condoms, clean needles. But we also need to leverage international organizations, national organizations, governments to be held to account, work with NGOs, work with civil society to reach those most in need and marginalized, key populations living with HIV. And policymakers, your political will, our political will, is the dimension nobody else can bring to the table. It takes courage, it takes determination, but together we will do it. Because the realm of solution is not only the biomedical, as you know, it is in the political sphere to protect civil space, to protect the space for civil society activists, for individuals. At a time when civic space becomes constricted, imposed upon, oppressive measures, increased governmental control in so many countries, as just also highlighted again by the World Economic Forum, we need to support those organizations. Political will is only as good as the voice, the determination, and the implementation. I will not belabor the legislation that was included in just 56 other countries, no, 65. I've spoken too much in English the last few days. I mix up my Dutch and my English numbers again. 65, yeah. 65 countries alone have adopted restrictive legislation, restricting civic space. And who are the victims? Who are the most impacted? Minority groups, marginalized groups, vulnerable groups, when it comes to people living with HIV and AIDS. Therefore, we need to do more to recognize the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people. And create the environment, breaking barriers, building bridges, shared humanity. No society is whole if anyone on its soil is restricted in the exercise of their rights. We need to protect young people, girls and boys, decriminalize communities, such as men who have sex with men, sex workers and injecting drug users. We need to ensure access to treatment, including psychosocial care to all in need. And we need to focus, as Dina already so brilliantly said, on human rights, gender equality, and social acceptance. We have to show courage and determination, as I said, but you show it day in, day out, and you can count on us, myself, the government of the Netherlands, to walk the talk with you and me. And last but not least, I'm delighted that my colleague, the Dutch Minister for Medical Care and Sports, decided to finance PrEP for high-risk groups in the Netherlands. And I'm also delighted to announce an amount of 10 million euros today for that similar goal as outside of the Netherlands, to reach those who nobody else wants to reach. We will do our bit. Your agenda is my agenda. Breaking barriers, building bridges, together.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President of the International AIDS Society and International Chair for AIDS 2018, Linda Gale Becker, and AIDS 2018 Local Co-Chair and Professor of Medicine at the Amsterdam University Medical Centers, Peter Rice.
Goedenavond, welcome. I am so glad you are all here. And on behalf of the International AIDS Society, I warmly welcome you all to AIDS 2018. I would like to take a moment to thank the dozens of people who have given countless volunteer hours to create this conference. Making Amsterdam a reality has been a nearly 4-year journey for many of us. If you can, and if the slide will come up, I'm hoping you will take a moment this week to thank each of these wonderful people behind me here for all of their selfless work. Can you believe it's been 2 years since the closing of AIDS 2016 in Durban, and I am so happy and honored to join you once again. I'm energized, having spent this past weekend surrounded by hundreds of terrific young people who are here in force for AIDS 2018. After 2 days with them, I'd like to share one thing I've learned. For colleagues who, like me, are feeling somewhat worn out by the bleak state of our global politics, I would say now is the time to snap out of it. The next generation is motivated and mobilized, and they have no time for pessimism or negativism. For AIDS 2018, you asked us that we make room at the table for these young people. We heard you, and they are here, in quantity and in quality. We have here the largest number of youth participants of any AIDS conference ever, including the largest number of youth scholarships. We also have the biggest youth-dedicated space in the global village. We thank the many youth-led networks that have contributed, and to name just a few: Teenagizer, Youth Against AIDS, the Amsterdam Youth Force, Y+, and many, many more. They are all here. But friends, their presence only matters in as much as we include these young people in our conversations this week. The conference program is full of important, relevant, and urgent science. Our success in fighting HIV requires that all of this is relevant to and resonates with young people. So to all of you who are under 30 in the audience tonight, I give you full permission this week to ask over and over again, does this make sense? And what does this mean for me? I was particularly inspired yesterday at the Generation Now, Our Health and Our Rights pre-conference, where a multi-generational group of advocates, policymakers, researchers, and frontline health workers came together to connect the dots between HIV, sexual reproductive health and rights, and the unique needs of adolescents and young women. The merits of gender equality are no longer up for debate. Treating women and girls like second-class citizens is not acceptable, and this practice can no longer be ignored. We need to come together across generations to say enough is enough. Enough of letting ideology rule over evidence-based realities. Enough of offering HIV and sexual reproductive health care services separately, or even worse, making doctors and nurses choose one over the other. This has disastrous health consequences for women, for girls, and therefore society at large. Enough of women and girls not having access to basic services because of shame or taboo or lack of access to education, or because men make the rules. I say there is no excuse for men to remove women's choice for safer sex because of the fear and reality of violence. We say enough. One of the most unique aspects of our program over the next 4 days is how it directly bridges young advocates and seasoned professionals, and then gives those advocates the resources they need to break down the barriers in their own communities. Breaking the barriers and building bridges between the generations is an essential part of what this conference must do. And no one knows that better than my friend Lambert Grins, Dutch ambassador for sexual reproductive health and rights and HIV/AIDS, whose term sadly comes to a close at the end of this conference. The fact that such a role even exists is a testament to the commitment of the Netherlands to end this epidemic. During his tenure, Lambert has fought for the rights of those most impacted by HIV, men who have sex with men, sex workers, women, and young people. He has championed practical approaches to integrating sexual and reproductive health, rights, and HIV across the world and the United Nations. Without him and his dedicated team, including Elf and Monique, we would not have the meeting you see here today. Thank you, Lambert and team. There is another transition that is happening as we speak. At the close of AIDS 2018, the IAS will have a new president, the terrific Dr. Anton Pozniak, and I'll have more to say about that on Friday, but we will also have a new executive director. It's no secret that our current executive director, Owen Ryan, joined the IAS at a very difficult time for our organization. In the last 4 and a bit years, he has transformed the International AIDS Society, how we work, and he has been instrumental in creating a strong, stable organization focused on serving you, our membership. I will miss you considerably, Owen, as we all will, and we thank you, and we give you every best wish for your future. I'm also happy, though, to proudly announce our new executive director, Kevin Osborne. Kevin is a fellow South African who joins us with more than 30 years of public health experience, working with a wide range of partners. Also, importantly, as an overdue milestone for our organization, Kevin will be the first IAS executive director openly living with HIV. We welcome you, Kevin, and best wishes for a happy and successful tenure. As you saw in our opening video, a lot has happened since 1992. It's impossible to be here and not take a moment to remember the many brave, resilient people who fought with us but aren't here tonight. I'd like to take a moment to remember my dear friend David Cooper, friend to many of us in the room here today. David served as president of the IAS from 1994 to 1998. He built and led for 32 years one of the world's most recognized research centers for HIV, the Kirby Institute in Sydney, Australia. At the center of the Institute was David's philosophy that scientists and community needed to work together to address clinical and structural challenges, including stigma and discrimination. David was a brave researcher, an invaluable collaborator, and an irreplaceable force in the HIV community. You can see David's unstoppable drive through the world and at this conference. From the HIV-NAT collaboration he founded with the late Dr. Joop Lange and Dr. Prapan Panupak, to his early support for what would become AMFA's Treat Asia program. His spirit and his work lives on. Remembering him and honoring his contributions to our field fills me with gratitude for a life well lived. I'm also so grateful that one of Dave's two daughters, Ilana, has joined us tonight, and ask her to take our warmest wishes back to Dori, Dave's wife, and the rest of the family, as well as all at the Kirby Institute in Australia. Thinking of David and so many giants on whom this field has been built, I turn to the words of the late Nelson Mandela. It is Madiba's centenary year, and it has been good this year to reflect on this great South African, a global icon and an important example to us all. Madiba told us that action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world. I hope in the next 4 days at this conference, your hearts will be stirred, your minds expanded, and as you return home, AIDS 2018 will be the turning point for you when you decided, each one of you, to roll up your sleeves and change your world. And now I'd like to turn to my fantastic co-chair, Peter Rice, who has been an extraordinary partner and confidant over many years, but even more so recently. Thank you, Peter, for your tireless work, problem solving, and consistently upbeat outlook. It has been a pleasure to work with you, Peter.
While I wait, here we go. Thank you, Linda Gale, for being the wonderful and passionate person that you are, and I think you all saw what I mean with passionate. And you also have been the best possible co-chair that I could have wished for, and I've loved every minute working with you. As you've welcomed our audience in Dutch, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, Dobry wieczór, bonsoir, buenas tardes, wan shang hao, salam alaikum, and once more, good evening. Since the beginning of the AIDS pandemic, the Dutch have been deeply involved with the many issues raised by this disease. It has been our particular concern to show great solidarity with HIV-infected people and people with AIDS. We have worked diligently to develop an integrated national policy, including prevention and education efforts, provision of proper care for HIV-infected persons, careful consideration of the legal and ethical issues surrounding the disease, and a well-balanced program of biomedical and social science research. These are not my own words. They are the words of Amsterdam Mayor Ed van Tijn, which he wrote in the abstract book in 1992. Yes, we actually still had books in those days, when the conference first came to Amsterdam. Reading them again made me realize that the basic principles of our response to the epidemic remain true to this very day, as you've just heard also from Minister Kaag. All that we do in responding to the epidemic at its core not only has to be and to remain firmly rooted in science and the generation of evidence-based knowledge, but it must also include the hands-on involvement of affected and at-risk communities and the translation of knowledge into action jointly with these same communities and with policymakers. Going back in history, shining and effective examples in our country were the introduction of needle exchange for people who use drugs already in the early 1980s, and the rapid introduction in 1996 of HIV protease inhibitors as part of what we then called HAART by a very personal decision to do the right thing and subsidize this novel and life-saving treatment by then Minister of Health, Els Borst. And as you've just heard from Minister Kaag as well, just a few weeks ago, the decision by our Minister for Medical Care and Sport, Bruno Bruins, to likewise do the right thing and formally support the provision of PrEP in the Netherlands. Although I must say that the implementation of this decision should, and in my view, can certainly be speeded up. But does this mean we can sit back and just go about business as usual in the Netherlands? No, we can and should not. Although we find ourselves in a city and a country that has or has almost reached the 1990 targets, we need to double our efforts to reach those individuals who currently do not yet benefit or benefit too late from our prevention and care services. An estimated 400 to 500 people become newly infected with HIV every year in the Netherlands, mostly men having sex with men, and it's 400 to 500 too many. Now that we have a decision on the provision of PrEP, if we truly want to achieve our aim of 0 new infections, we need to make sure that PrEP, together with HIV testing and as part of combination prevention, actually reaches those men, including the ones with a migration background. On the care side of the spectrum, in still far too many instances, people, and particular again, men and women with a migration background, are being diagnosed when they already have advanced infection or even AIDS. We need to fix this, and like with the provision of PrEP, need to do so with the help and close involvement of these affected communities. Let me switch back again to Mayor Ed van Tijn, who in 1992 also wrote, and I quote, "In addition to our national policy, the Netherlands also contributes to AIDS prevention in developing countries and Eastern Europe. And once again, as you've heard, I'm happy to say this commitment remains very, very strong." The unwavering support expressed by our late Amsterdam Mayor, Eberhard van der Laan, and we miss him, not having him here, and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help spotlight Eastern Europe and Central Asia at this conference were among the key reasons for IES and its partners to bring the conference back to Amsterdam. I feel confident that you'll see the efforts of both the conference coordinating and program committees, as well as those of the ministry and NGOs such as AFU International, and this is a good moment for a big, big thank you to all of them. And also for the whole of the Amsterdam Planning Group to turn this commitment into action, reflected in both the scientific and Global Village and Youth programs throughout the week. But that action cannot and must not stop at this conference. It has to lead to real and tangible change in the EECA region. Change which can and will only happen if we all do away with being judgmental about who should have access to state-of-the-art HIV prevention, treatment, and care. The answer is crystal clear. People, regardless of where they happen to live, the color of their skin, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, identity, income, or whichever other characteristic, should be seen as individuals, each with the basic universal human right to health. As one of the speakers at the conference in Melbourne said in 2014, we need a vaccine against intolerance as much as we need a vaccine against HIV. We cannot accept, nor for that matter afford, for bad policies or politics to stand in our way. Back in 1992, conference chair Dr. Jonathan Mann, when asked about the role of politics in the AIDS response, said, and I quote, "I don't think politicians around the world have yet understood just how powerful the aspirations are for health all over the world, and that what we are going to begin to see in AIDS and also in health more generally is the desires of people for better health expressed in politics by getting leaders who understand the real desires of their people and act upon them." It shows, this is 1992, it shows how visionary Dr. Mann was. The most important barriers we need to continue to break are those which promote and sustain the inequity in the response to the epidemic. And the key bridge we need to build is the one moving us from inequity to equity. This very same vision very much was what guided the work of 6 of our colleagues and friends in the fight against AIDS, who so tragically lost their lives aboard MH17. Joep Lange, Jacqueline van Tongeren, Glenn Raymond Thomas, Martine de Schutter, Pim de Kuijer, and Lucie van Mens. Linda Gale and I, everyone on our conference coordinating committee, and the entire IAS are so grateful to the members of each of their families for being with us this evening. Thank you for taking a moment to stand up. Thank you. Thank you for that. I did not know Martine, Lucie, Pim, or Glenn Thomas closely, but Jacqueline and Joep were close colleagues and friends. Sorry about getting emotional. And our lives, both professionally and personally, were intertwined for so many years. Our journey to bring the conference back to Amsterdam began 5 years ago, when the 3 of us were asked by the RAI Convention Center to help with the initial step. Knowing that Joep had suggested for me to be the local conference co-chair, and that Jacqueline very much supported this, is what gave me the inspiration to keep at it, also after July 2014, and to make the conference a big, big success, not just in scientific terms, but also in terms of community involvement. How Jacqueline would have loved to see the largest ever youth village here this week. The Global Village and Youth Program, when first piloted at the International AIDS Conference in Bangkok in 2004, was very much Jacqueline's brainchild. As the world continues to seek justice for what happened on that dreadful day in July of 2014, I hope the following performance of Two and Only will serve as a moment for each of you to reflect on the loss of people you loved, but also using the words of Princess Mabel as a celebration of the lives of Jacqueline and Joep, Martine, Pim, Lucy, and Glenn Raymond Thomas, and their efforts to create a better and more equitable world. Please welcome to the stage Dutch National Ballet dancers Marijn Rademacher, and Marijn, I'm very, very grateful for you to be here, and Timothy van Pauke, supported musically by Michael Benjamin and choreographed by Wubke Kuinersma.
If the nights weren't dark and shallow, if the weather wouldn't be so cold, then the pain that you brought to me would not exist or would cease to unfold. I'm bound to enter grounds I've never entered. I'm bound to find what I wasn't meant to find. 'Cause of you, I now know the answer to have a painful yearning on my mind. For you were my only true love, and you were the only one I ever longed for. In the darkest and most deepest hour, you were the waves to wash up my shores. But you didn't forgive the tragic moments that struck me like lightning strikes a ship. The moments which I could not have dealt with, the moments in which I just couldn't get no grip. And it's late, the midnight thoughts surround me. They remind me of the times that we once had. but my mistakes and your aging beauty makes me plead, but it mostly makes me mad. For you were my only true love, and you were the only one I ever longed for. In the darkest and most deepest hours, you were the waves to wash up my shores. For the beauty that you've shown to me, well, it don't mean none as I've misused your trust, but I've never taken it for granted. Just lost my glow and I turned it into rust. So take heed to an island lying yonder. Take heed with a ship that sails on high. Take with you my sorrows and your graces, for I want to forget my unearnest life. We were walking by the gold dust road, your heart so heavy and your mind so cold, and the roses round your head lost their color to blue from red, as my fingers slipped through your golden hair. As my fingers, they slip through your golden hair. Well, I stumbled through the weeds in the meadows, and your midnight love left nothing but your shadow. I came searching for your eyes. They smiled, yet they were blind, as my fingers slipped through your golden hair. As my fingers, they slipped through your golden hair. Have I ever tried to hurt you? Darling, what is it you're thinking of? Oh, a tempest might arise from these oceans in your eyes. And if you want me to, I might make it a goodbye. We were walking by the gold dust road, your heart so heavy and your mind so cold, and the roses round your head lost their color to blue from red, as my fingers slipped through your golden hair. As my fingers, they ran through your golden hair. my fingers round through your golden hair. As my fingers they round through your golden hair.
Amazing. What a powerful performance. Let's once again give it up to the Dutch National Ballet. And whenever they're ready for a thruple performance, I'm ready to go. I'll just take off my shirt, oil up, and get stretching. Now it is my great privilege to introduce Her Royal Highness Princess Mabel van Oranje. Princess Mabel has been a key supporter in bringing the conference to Amsterdam and highlighting its importance over the past several years. She's been active in this movement for over 2 decades as an early supporter of the Global Fund and through her work with Open Society Foundations, the Elders, and now Girls Not Brides. She has always championed those most vulnerable to HIV and continues to be a bold voice for the marginalized and the excluded. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Royal Highness. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to Amsterdam. It is wonderful to be here with all of you in what I consider my hometown. Throughout its history, Amsterdam has stood for freedom, open-mindedness, pragmatism, diversity, and an international outlook. These are the values that this community, meeting here today, also holds dear. And I trust that these values will inform our conversation over the coming days, as they are crucial to achieving our common goal of a world without AIDS. Now, I got involved in the AIDS movement in the late 1990s, when I realized that much of the progress on human rights and development in which I was involved was actually being undermined by the epidemic. At that time, my involvement was mainly focused on ensuring that prevention and treatment would become available to all. Men having sex with men, sex workers, injecting drug users, and prisoners. They were the excluded people of the time, the ones facing discrimination, ignorance, stigmatization, and sometimes outright violence. We advocated for policies to acknowledge and address their realities, and for funding to cover their needs. And while we've made great progress, we recently also have seen real serious backlashes in some parts of the world. Now, back then, I could not have imagined that I, 2 decades later, would be standing here worrying about adolescent girls, teenagers, beginning their adult life, going to school, dreaming about their futures. But my more recent work to end child marriage has brought me face to face with the reality that marginalized adolescent girls in developing countries are, today, among the most disempowered, excluded, and invisible people on earth. Now, every year, millions of vulnerable girls face a multitude of challenges, including exclusion from education, child marriage, early pregnancy, gender-based violence, and poverty. And all those factors put these girls and young women at an increased risk of HIV infection. Now, this is a huge problem, and it has even bigger consequences. Let me share a few facts that tell you a worrisome story. Globally, girls and young women are twice as likely to contract HIV as boys and young men. In sub-Saharan Africa, girls count for 3 of every 4 new HIV infections among 15 to 19-year-olds. And in Eastern and Southern Africa, women aged between the age of 15 and 24 make up only 10% of the population, but they account for 25% of all new infections. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that in that part of the world, you also find very high rates of child marriage, because the connections are everywhere. So it's not surprising to me that of the 12 million girls who become child brides every year, across cultures, across religions, across continents, that these girls are almost always also the girls who are excluded from education, who live in male-dominated societies, who lack the power to negotiate safe sex, and who are particularly vulnerable to gender-based violence. These child brides also intersect with the millions of girls and women who lack information about reproductive health and AIDS, and who do not have easy access to contraceptives or HIV testing. So looking at these numbers and their impact, the message is pretty clear to me. If we do not act now, we will lose an entire generation with catastrophic consequences. Now, being a pragmatist, I would like to highlight 3 things that I think need to be done. First, we need to acknowledge that we cannot create a world without AIDS unless we also focus on adolescent girls and young women. And I honestly don't care how you define them, as marginalized, as key populations, as hard to reach, whatever. We just should stop ignoring them. We must make sure that the infection rates among this group stop growing and actually become 0. Second, we need to design programs that address the real needs of these girls and young women, and that actually reach them. Let's be honest. The rising rates of HIV infection are partially happening because we are underfunding prevention efforts and sexuality education. And because most of the programs for young people that receive funding are actually being developed by adults, aging people like me. So, what we need is we must include young women in the design, and young women and adolescent girls in the design and rollout of new prevention efforts. And at the same time, also make sure that we include young men and boys. Thirdly, we need to break the silos in which development sectors, including all of us in the AIDS movement, are working. We need multi-sectoral approaches that link health and education interventions with social protection and political empowerment. In sum, I think we need to get better, more pragmatic, and smarter in our work. Let's look at girls' and women's lives in a comprehensive way, from babies to children to adolescents to adults. And And let's also look at prevention and treatment in a comprehensive way, beyond the clinic, into the schools, into the girls' clubs, and into the community. Dear friends, as you know, the theme of this conference is breaking barriers, building bridges. Now let's break the barriers that girls and young women face in so many areas of their lives in order to stop the appalling rate of HIV infection. Let's educate and empower them. And let's design services in a way that actually speak to them. Let's also build bridges by treating girls as a whole person. Let's stop providing education services on Monday, contraceptive classes on Tuesday, child marriage counseling on Wednesday, etc. Let's make sure that programming is joined up and reaches these girls effectively. This does not only make sense from a policy point of view, but it is also more efficient from a financial point of view. So donors, I hope you're listening. In conclusion, let this meeting be a turning point, a moment where the true scale of HIV risk being faced by millions of adolescent girls and young women is recognized, and where the immense talent and power that is assembled here in this room are directed to the needs of those girls. Thank you.
What an event. We just had a princess on stage, and now I get to introduce an icon. I am thrilled to introduce the 2014 Eurovision champion and gender-defying LGBTQ artist, the one and only Conchita.
Talking about it, that was my greatest fear. That people would talk about it behind my back if I ever share my secret. Because still today, people talk about this disease in a way that it is not fair. There's a lot of stigmatization that comes with HIV, and I believe that's the case because too many people know too little about this disease. I'm just one single person amongst many affected. But then again, I'm aware that I'm not, because when I first posted my story, it was shared across the globe. I received nothing but support, and still I would like to underline that I do not define myself through my HIV status. It is just a fraction of who I am. Today I'm not standing up here on this stage to share details of my personal story. I'm here to use the attention I get and to direct it to this disease and to help make it just normal to talk about it. Today I feel fitter, more beautiful, and stronger than ever before in my life. In a sense, this is also because I faced my greatest fear and was able to talk about it. That is the message that I wish to convey. Yes, I live in a region of this planet where we have access to the best and most advanced medication available. People living with HIV and getting treatment can live just as long alive as those who are negative. You can touch us, you can kiss us. You can love us just as you would anyone else. That is what I would like people to talk about. That is what I want the media to talk about. That is what I would like everyone to hear and read about. The research and the impressive results that have been achieved over the past years. I want everyone to know about the research that has been conducted by incredibly talented and passionate people, scientists and technicians who care deeply and who are working tirelessly to end this epidemic. I'm talking about people here in this room, out there in the laboratories and institutions around the world, doing their best to end this disease for all of humanity. And at the same time, I'd like to know why medical treatment advances that I have access to are still not available to so many affected. How long will it take until we make our research and affordable therapies accessible to every single human who needs it? When will this epidemic finally be put to an end? How can we spread the news that people should not be afraid, not of HIV or people living with the virus? How can we, as a global society, fast forward to a day when an HIV diagnosis is no big deal? It's not about playing it down, please don't get me wrong. It's about spreading the facts, and not just creating shallow and sensational media stories. In order to end the cruel stigma and discrimination that comes with this specific disease, we all need to read and hear and talk about HIV and AIDS just like any other illness. And we cannot stop talking about it until everybody knows that being HIV positive is just a diagnosis, and that as long as those affected have access to the right treatment, they can end up virally suppressed, unable to transmit the virus, and carry on with pursuing their life passions and realizing their dreams. Talking about it, that is what I did, and what I believe our global society needs to do to accelerate the eradication of this virus, because we deserve to live in a world free of HIV. Well, I think it's safe to say that we wouldn't be where we are today without a courageous Hollywood icon who once graced this stage in 1992 and shared a similar message of compassion, Dame Elizabeth Taylor. You heard her words earlier tonight, but they are worth repeating. The fight against AIDS is not and must never be the fight against other people. It is the fight of human beings against the virus. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Today, her fighting spirit lives on through the Elizabeth Taylor Human Rights Award. To introduce this award, I would like to bring some of my friends out here to join me. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elizabeth Taylor's grandchildren and ambassadors for the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, Quinn Tivy, Layla Wilding, and Naomi Wilding.
Thank you, Conchita, and thank you everybody here tonight. When our grandmother stood here in Amsterdam at the 1992 International AIDS Conference, she did not expect that my cousins, Layla and Naomi, and I would be here 26 years later, advocating for many of the same issues she fought for then. Although the years, the decades, have grown in number, the urgent fight for social justice and human rights around the world has maintained day after day. Our grandmother gave her voice to a reality that wasn't getting the attention it deserved in 1992. And it is our humble honor to continue that legacy tonight, alongside everyone here this evening.
Our grandmother worked tirelessly to advocate for people affected by HIV and AIDS, but she wasn't alone in that fight. She was fortunate to work with many fierce HIV advocates, and this year we lost one of her closest partners in this fight, Dr. Matilda Krim. Dr. Krim was a geneticist and virologist with a passion for human rights. Anyone who knew her knows that that is a tremendous simplification for a woman whose grace and commitment created what has become a founding marker of the AIDS movement, a joint collaboration between scientists, activists, policymakers, and donors, the American Foundation for AIDS Research. In the early 80s, Matilda was outraged by what she saw as inaction and ambivalence due to stigma and discrimination. In 1985, she joined forces with our grandmother to create what we all know today as AMFAR, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, which has gone on to raise more than $500 million to fight and find a cure for AIDS. Layla, Quinn, and I are here to give the Elizabeth Taylor Human Rights Award. In so doing, we honor Dr. Krim and our grandmother, as we believe this year's recipient epitomizes their shared commitment and fighting spirit.
I'm a little bit smaller than everyone else. The Elizabeth Taylor Human Rights Award is a joint partnership between the International AIDS Society, AMFAR, and the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. It recognizes the efforts of individuals who have achieved major breakthroughs or shown exceptional courage in their efforts to advocate for human rights in the field of HIV. We are delighted to announce that this year's recipient is Alan Achesa Maleche. The law can be a powerful tool for protecting human rights, as our honoree has demonstrated countless times in his home country of Kenya. As the founder executive of KELN, the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network on HIV and AIDS, Alan has litigated landmark cases that stopped the incarceration of people living with TB, prevented the government from registering the names of children living with HIV, fought to end the forced sterilization of women living with HIV, and much more. The organization that Alan founded to lead this work, KELN, is recognized globally for its work to advance the rights of persons affected by HIV and tuberculosis. Please join us in expressing our deep appreciation to this hero of the global movement for human rights, Alan Achesa Maleche.
Thank you, Conchita, Quinn, Layla, and Naomi. I wish to express my deepest appreciation to the International AIDS Society, the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and AMFAR. On behalf of my colleagues and the people we serve, I'm deeply honored to accept the Elizabeth Taylor Human Rights Award. Thank you also for recognizing that the efforts you described are truly not just my own, but are the collective efforts of the diverse men and women of KELN and NGOs in other developing countries. I'm grateful to many individuals for their support, especially my wife, Olivia, and my daughters, Zuri and Nia, who are staying up late in Nairobi to watch this on the live feed. There are many days when the challenges we face in Kenya and globally can seem endless. Human rights are never really secure. They must be fought for every day. As we enter this week of deliberations, let us not forget the millions of people, including vulnerable and key populations, still becoming infected with HIV, TB, and malaria, who require treatment, care, and support. UNAIDS rightly warns us that progress is slow compared to our global ambition. We must pick up the pace. We owe these communities a successful sixth replenishment of the Global Fund. We also owe these communities a strong political declaration from the high-level meeting on TB. I know the negotiations have gone on a bit longer, but as Nelson Mandela said, it's never too late to do the right thing, and so we call for a strong political declaration for the UN high-level meeting. As I conclude, I want to raise one last point, and this is what we have to do as human rights defenders. 23 of our sisters in the movement have issued a statement about sexual harassment. And I believe them and stand in solidarity with them. We look to the United Nations to set the standard on human rights and gender equality. We are not there yet. We are a long way from there. This award will inspire us to continue and expand this important work that we do. Thank you.
Amazing. Let's give another round of applause for Alan and his extraordinary work. Thank you, Conchita, whose voice has inspired the world, and to Layla, Naomi, and Quinn. The work that they do carrying on the legacy of their grandmother is inspiring. Thank you for sharing your grandmother's commitment and continuing her work. She was truly a phenomenal woman who spoke truth to power, and I would love to hear what she had to say to the current administration if she was around today. I mean, we're hearing a lot of current events and stats, but I mean, having the president ask Bill Gates twice the difference between HIV and HPV, oh, that's exhausting, isn't it? But to be fair, I mean, I don't know if the difficulty for him lies more in the science or the basic alphabet, so. Enough about unremarkable men. Let's talk about some phenomenal women. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dorothy Anyango. Dorothy is the CEO and founder of Women Fighting AIDS in Kenya and has been HIV positive for 27 years. She holds a university degree in community development and is currently pursuing her master's degree in leadership. She is a happy mother of 3 children and a grandmother to 2. Please join me in welcoming Dorothy.
Thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Habari, as we say it in Kenya. Bonjour tout le monde. Good evening, all. Hola. "26 years ago, in July 1992, 56 of us stood in this stage during the opening of the 8th International AIDS Conference. We were all women living with HIV, determined that we and our communities should never again be invisible, voiceless, and ignored at any one of these conferences or anywhere else. Coming from a workshop where we shared our stories, our personal experience, we felt empowered, united, and committed to collective activism. We read our 12 statements, which we had drafted under the new umbrella network that we decided to name the International Community of Women Living with AIDS, HIV and AIDS, ICW. The 12 statements evolved from the experience we shared. Some of us had been abandoned by our families and our friends, lost our jobs, lost our homes, and had our children taken away. Some of us had undergone forced abortions and sterilization, and many of us had no access to medical care for even the most basic conditions. It is not easy to describe how bleak everything looked at that time. Our families and communities were dying all around us. We were likely to die ourselves. There was little support for us, rejection, and no antiretroviral. But we were determined, in whatever time we had, to work together to make a difference. In the years that have followed, women living with HIV in all our magnificent global diversity became agents for incredible change. We created support groups where none existed. We became champions for legal and policy change in our countries. We fought hard alongside other community leaders for access to affordable antiretroviral therapy for everyone, no matter where in the world they lived. We cared for the dying friends and loved ones. We advocated for the creation of UNAIDS and the Global Fund. We influenced multiple sectors. We raised and supported families and mentored new generation of activists across the globe. We challenged stigma and gave HIV a new face and a powerful voice. Like many others of our generation, only a few of our group were fortunate enough to gain timely access to life-saving antiretrovirals, and fewer still, 14 in total, are alive today to tell the tale. In 1992, we were a diverse group of women from all regions and communities across the world, Yet of the original 24 women from Africa, only 3 have survived. More than a quarter century later, we have returned to the opening of the conference to honor the memory of our sisters who stood here beside us and of many millions of other people living with HIV and infected by HIV who we have lost during the years. But we also stand here to celebrate the leadership of our peers and peers network who collectively have transformed the world since we last stood on the stage. The Network of Sex Workers project was also founded at this conference in 1992, and many others have followed, including GNP+, MSM Global Forum, ITPC, Input, GATE, and Y+. The amazing resilience, creativity, and tenacity of diverse communities and networks of people living with HIV and affected by HIV in every country never ceases to amaze us. And we stand here to acknowledge and welcome the vibrant new leadership among young people living and affected by HIV. So much has been changed, and yet so much work still remains to be done. Led by this new generation in partnership with everyone of youth in this opening ceremony and across the different sectors you represent, to work towards a time when no more lives are lost due to lack of HIV treatment and no new infections happen. Thank you. The need for our collective action and solidarity has never been more urgent than at this moment. We witnessed in many parts of the world attacks on our sexual, reproductive, and other human rights as women, and attacks on the rights of our children, on the rights of indigenous people, on the rights of sex workers, on the rights of LGBTI communities, on the rights of people of color, on the rights of people who use drugs, on the rights of migrants and refugees, on the rights of people with disabilities. We are committed to working alongside our comrades in this movement and beyond to counter these assaults. HIV has taught us that, irrespective of where we come from, we are all equal and all deserve dignity, respect, and the right to life. Thank you, and asante sana. The fight continues. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Amazing. What makes this conference truly special is science and community coming together. That is the heart of the International AIDS Conference. And here tonight to give a very special community welcome is an incredible group of young advocates. Maria Godlevskaya from Russia, Julian Karbogosian from Lebanon, and Mercy Nagulube from the United Kingdom. Please join me in welcoming them.
Для меня самое главное в человеке – это глаза. Взгляд женщины, которая когда-либо узнала о своей ВИЧ-инфекции, или которая не может примириться с фактом ВИЧ-инфекции у ее ребенка. Глаза активистов перед акциями прямого действия. Глаза наших спикеров на заседаниях высокого уровня. Посмотрите в глаза соседу, что вы видите? Я вижу огонь. Для меня именно эти глаза всегда будут оставаться примером, и вы будете заражать меня огнем, а я всех остальных. Я не боюсь говорить о своей ВИЧ-инфекции, потому что чувствую поддержку семьи и вашу. Для того, чтобы сейчас я могла без страха, боли и унижения говорить о своей ВИЧ-инфекции, вы очень много сделали. И это правда так. Мы все достойны качественного, полноценного лечения, не в зависимости от сексуальной ориентации, убеждений и религиозных предпочтений. Мы все достойны качественной жизни с ВИЧ и без нее. Для многих людей по-прежнему стигма и дискриминация остаются главным барьером, чтобы не обратиться за помощью, чтобы сохранить свое здоровье и здоровье своих близких. Пока женщины и мужчины прячутся, пока есть дискриминационные законы, пока есть отторжение в медицинских учреждениях, эпидемия будет только расти. Боритесь за завышением цен на РВТ. Боритесь с низким качеством препаратов. Боритесь на предотвращение новых случаев рождения детей, живущих с ВИЧ. Я верю в сообщество. Я как звено этой нерушимой цепи сопротивления отстаиваю и буду отстаивать права людей, живущих с ВИЧ, на полноценный, качественно высокий уровень жизни. Я призываю вас поддержать кампанию «Преследуйте вирус, но не людей». Спасибо.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My main message for you tonight is that we must embrace diversity, for without it, our world would remain dull, and our strategies for addressing HIV even duller. Our diversity is our strength. The global HIV response underscores the importance of leveraging diversity based on sexual orientation, gender identity, race, ethnicity, and HIV status. This is core to what it means to respect and accept dignity for all. I started my journey when I was 18 years old. Although I was sure about the world injustices, I also was aware that each and every single young person has a role to play to make the world a better place. However, I didn't expect myself to be standing at the plenary stage of the International AIDS Conference as I am today. My fellow young people, you are not only the future, but also the present. We are the world's biggest population. We must fully embrace our roles as key players in the fight against AIDS and for human rights. Our main enemies remain stigma and discrimination. We are still being deprived of our rights, denied access to sexual health care services because of age of consent policies that doesn't make any sense. Dear service providers, it's not enough to be welcoming us at your centers or clinics. We also need you to accept and respect young people in all of our diversity. This also means understanding our lives and lifestyles, our work and school schedules, our friendship networks, our gender and gender expression, our families, the ones that we were born into and the ones that we choose. As a young person coming from Middle East, North Africa, it's important to mention that last week, UNAIDS launched their report, Miles to Go, and the results were shocking to our region, as it mentioned that there is a rise in new infections by 25%. Taking into account that our region of the world still until today imposes travel restrictions against PL-HIV. This attack on our dignity is also an attack on our hopes and dreams. On the other hand, I can tell you that today we are stronger than ever. Young people are finding their voices, demanding their needs all over the world, speaking up and out on panel, like we have seen at the Youth Pre-Conference and like we will see at the coming days of the main conference. In the spirit of the coalition, I'd like to thank GNP Plus and Y Plus Network for pushing the agenda of young people, and also the International HIV/AIDS Alliance for supporting youth-led initiatives through Ready Plus program. Special thanks to AMPACT that held its 8th pre-meeting conference yesterday titled Out With It, where 500 youth activists gathered around and discussed openly about sexual health and rights. The experience reinforced for me the power of diversity and the importance of youth voices now and in the future global response to HIV. Always remember, fresh voices making choices. Thank you.
There is a bridge in Honduras that was originally built to withstand anything, and I think it is a perfect metaphor for the HIV response today. It is a bridge that survived the odds, and when a hurricane came, the bridge withstood the winds. However, the river moved. Too often, in the HIV response, we are caught in the gap of not being able to reach who we need to reach and effectively do all that we need to do. How can we, in our fight against HIV, be innovative enough to make sure that even when our river moves, our bridges do not become a stagnant journey to nowhere? This all comes down to a number of different factors, but in my conversations with stakeholders, community members and clinicians, the theme of complacency rings louder than any other challenge in this fight, and it has to stop. Activism is not made up of complacency or disregard for people. It is not negligence or criminalization of groups that stops our HIV response from being the best it can. We cannot continue to disregard the reality that our activism is a responsibility we have to this world. In 2015, over 150 world leaders signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals. And what I'm asking of every single one of you, no matter what your capacity, is that we stop treating these goals as faraway dreams and start looking at them as expectations. We have the tools we need to fight this fight and do it well. And my final question is this. We're all going to build bridges this week, but where is your bridge going to lead us? Don't let your bridge be a bridge to nowhere.
Our next speaker is Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization.
Good evening. I think it's a bit difficult if you speak after excellent speakers and excellent performance. Thank you for inviting me to participate in such an important international public event, and it's a true honor. And I would like to thank Linda and also Peter Rice. I would also like to thank the government of the Netherlands for its leadership in promoting health rights, reaching out to key populations, and promoting health equity. I also want to remember the colleagues we lost in the tragic MH17 crash 4 years ago, including one of our own, a WHO staff, Glenn Thomas. And I honor Glenn's memory and the memory of all those who died. As you may know, this is a landmark year for WHO. It's our 70th birthday. WHO was founded in 1948 on the conviction that health is a human right for all people, not a privilege for the few. And today, that conviction remains central to everything we do. And you have heard it from everybody before me. And it remains central to the fight against HIV. Since the turn of the century, we have made incredible progress. Together, we have turned the tide on HIV. We have transformed a death sentence into a treatable disease. Millions of people are on treatment. Even better, millions of people are not on treatment because we gave them the tools to protect themselves. We have accelerated research and development. We have pushed back the boundaries of science and are now in hot pursuit of a cure. We have championed the rights of the most marginalized and vulnerable. But we are not done. The gains we have made are under threat, with signs of wavering political commitment and declining funding. In May this year, the World Health Assembly approved a new 5-year strategy for WHO to support countries on their journey towards the Sustainable Development Goals. At its heart are what we call the triple billion targets for 2023. 1 billion more people benefiting from universal health coverage, and 1 million more people better protected from health emergencies, and 1 billion more people enjoying better health and well-being. We're now transforming WHO to become an organization capable of delivering on these targets where it matters most, not in Geneva, but on the ground in countries. And around the world, we're working with countries to strengthen their health systems and help them progress towards universal health coverage so that all people have access to the services they need without facing financial hardship. But the reality is that more than half of the world's population lacks access to essential health services, including vaccination, treatment for HIV, hepatitis, and TB, family planning services, and the ability to see a health worker. And every year, almost 100 million people are pushed into extreme poverty by the costs of paying for care out of their own pockets. This outrage must end. No one should get sick and die just because they're poor or marginalized. When Dorothy said only 3 survived out of 24, behind it is poverty that killed them. That's it. And it's lack of equity that killed them. It's lack of solidarity that killed them. We were late in saving them. Many of those who are being left behind are those most affected by HIV, including people who use drugs transgender people, sex workers, men who have sex with men, and prisoners. Our increasing focus on universal health coverage should not be seen as a threat to disease-specific programs such as HIV. Not at all. In fact, it's an opportunity to accelerate our efforts to eliminate AIDS and amplify the impact of investments in HIV. Because we have not truly helped a child if we treat her for HIV, but do not vaccinate the same child against measles. We have not truly helped a gay man if we give him PrEP, but leaves his depression untreated. We have not truly helped a sex worker if we give her STI screening, but not cancer screening. We have not truly helped a community if we give them condoms, but not smoking cessation services. Universal health coverage means all people who have access to all the services they need for all diseases and conditions. And I'm part of you. I've been participating in many of these meetings. You have shown what's possible when energy, passion, and resources are mobilized to address a devastating disease. You're the best example. You're the model. I now call on you to harness that same energy and passion and those same resources to achieve universal health coverage. That's how we will defeat AIDS and build a healthier, safer, fairer world for everyone, everywhere. And I hope you're with me. Are you ready for the challenge to use the same energy to bring universal health coverage? Are you with me? Are we together on this? Are we together on this? That's the answer. Universal health coverage based on primary health care, which is the foundation and focused on health promotion, disease prevention, and curative services at the primary health care itself. And above all, community-based and owned by our communities themselves. Thank you so much again. But I would like to tell you one secret. Peter Reyes was saying good evening in many languages. But do you know that Peter Rice actually was born in Ethiopia? And I have been expecting him to say, I'm a Segnalo. He didn't say it. But I'm just reminding you. And thank you so much, Peter, for being Ethiopian. Thank you. And I will add, do you know that all of us are Ethiopians? Some of us are Ethiopians, others are ex-Ethiopians, because we all come from Lucy. We're all the same race, and that's why solidarity is important. We're humankind. Let's take care of our planet and ourselves. We're one. We're the same. We are one. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next and final speaker is Michelle Sidibe, Executive Director, UNAIDS.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want just to say to Malaysia, I have heard you. I have gotten your wake-up call. I understand your high expectation for UN, and I want to thank you for your call. We are all into this world. We've believed that it will be inclusive and that we will have healthy societies. But in reality, our world is struggling with growing inequalities and intolerance for diversity. As Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it is done. The AIDS movement, in all its diversity, knows this. We have defeated our critics over and over. We have shown compassion for the most vulnerable. We have embraced innovation. As a result, many countries have made tremendous progress. So, do not let this distract us from our urgency. AIDS is not over. That is why I'm sounding the alarm. 1, we must close gaps. 2, we must break barriers. 3, we must...
A political struggle that does not have women at the heart of it, above it, below it, and within it is not a struggle at all. We're a group of women who dared to step into the light, to place ourselves at the heart of it, below it, and within it. And we feel strongly that there is a lack of respect, that individuals like Michelle Sedibe, who has been an enabler of and the protector of sexual harassment, continues to be invited into these spaces, particularly spaces that women occupy. These are spaces we fought for. We fought hard for these spaces. We are simply a group of women that receives no monetary reward from anyone, but sees it important to speak out. We hold no brief, have no political ambition, but individuals who are speaking for ourselves, our sisters, daughters, and mothers, who have for far too long been silenced because we know we are up against a patriarchy machine which is well-oiled and funded. Donors, support our struggle. We are women, we call on you. Too many stories of those who signed check using their power to bully and threaten those that challenge them. Michelle, we call on you to step away from the scripted and rehearsed propaganda machine and for once, look us in the face, look us in the eye, and speak the truth. You know us better. We will not stop, we will not be silenced, and we refuse to be silenced. Amandla!
Who's Michelle Sedibe anyway?
Thank you very much. I want just to say that I heard you. I listened to you, and I understand your anger. But let us just make sure that our fight against this epidemic is not divided. We have come so far, but we have miles to go. First, we have gaps to close. In Melbourne, we launched 90-90-90 to close the treatment gap. Nearly 22 million people are on treatment, but 15 million are still waiting, including more than 800,000 children. We cannot lose our focus on families and keeping them healthy. We are facing a prevention crisis. We know that the prevention dividends from treatment are not as big as we would have liked. We don't have a vaccine or a functional cure yet. That is why the Global HIV Prevention Coalition is critical. Because we have the tools, but not the political will to use them. As the young people say, don't compromise, condomize. In 2018, it is unacceptable that in 49 countries, new HIV infections are going up. Second, we need to break the barriers that exclude people from their rights. This includes our right to reproductive health and our right to comprehensive sexuality education. As Jonathan Mann said, to control the epidemic, we must confront inequities, unfairness, and discrimination, not in abstract, but in its concrete manifestations. Key population, gay men, and other men who have sex with men, sex workers, transgender people who use drugs, and prisoners make up 47% of all new infections, and they are not being reached. Too often, children, people aging with HIV, and people with disabilities are left out. Fragile communities, including indigenous people and people on the move, do not have the social, political, or economic capital to get the services they need. We need prevention, pace setters, to break structural barriers. Let us end punitive laws. Let us end child marriage. Let us end criminalization. Third, we who are privileged to be in this room have an obligation to right injustices. Our sisters have called upon us now to come together to support the Me Too movement, which is leading a social transformation, dismantling a male-dominated culture. Oppression and power imbalances must be reversed, and women and girls in all their diversity must be empowered. What the AIDS movement has done for HIV, we must also do to end gender-based violence. We need a shock to the system to overcome our collective complacency, to prevent and address HIV and violence against women. UNAIDS will champion a RISE commitment. Ending the AIDS epidemic by 2030 is by no means a foregone conclusion. Like all of you, I worry about money. We need all countries to invest more in HIV, including in communities and young people, because it is communities and today's young leaders who will end this epidemic. There is a persistent 20% gap between what is needed and what is available. We know small cuts can have big consequences for people. A fully funded global fund and the response is non-negotiable. Tonight, like many of you, I'm thinking of my sister, Prudence Mabele. Too many people living with HIV and dying from TB. These are senseless deaths. The upcoming UN high-level meeting on tuberculosis is a huge opportunity to bring AIDS out of isolation and push for HIV and TB integration. People living with HIV are the heart of our response. We all have a right to know our HIV status. All people have a right to be linked to care quickly. You can be undetectable, and let us all make sure you are not unforgettable. As Prudence reminded us, living with HIV should not be a lonely life. No one should be forgotten. At the halfway point to the 2020, this is our wake-up call. Let us quicken our pace. We have come so far. but we have miles to go. In closing, let me borrow from Robert Kennedy. We have nearly 1 million AIDS deaths every year. What we need now in the AIDS movement is not division. What we need now in the AIDS movement is love, wisdom, compassion, and a feeling of justice for all who suffer. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage your AIDS 2018 co-chairs and Master of Ceremonies.
Well, we just want to thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening. We feel incredibly inspired, and again, I'm sure you have been inspired by the amazing outpouring of hearts of the most incredible people here on the stage today. It is never good to not thank, and so I want to give a big thank you to the AIDS 2018 major industry sponsors who made this possible. Gilead Sciences, Johnson & Johnson Services, Merck Sharp & Dohme Corporation, and Mylan Laboratories. Thank you to all of you. And together with Peter, we wish you a pleasant evening and look forward to an absolutely incredible conference with you. Go well.
That's it from all of us tonight. Have an amazing, fulfilling week, and we look forward to seeing you around. Take care. Good night.